Hey there, hope you're doing good. Today we'll be looking at refactoring a small iOS app. The principles I tell you today apply to all languages and frameworks. So even if you're not an iOS engineer, this is relevant to you. This app is a tax calculator app. Before I get into the refactoring, let me tell you what the project is about. It calculates tax. It also calculates tax in the reverse direction, which is to say, if you want a certain amount of take home pay, how much gross salary should you negotiate for from the company, right? So that is the thing. And it also works for consultants, not just employees. This kind of project started life as a Python script and it's still available in that form. Marginal tax calculator. We ported this to an iOS app. It works on Mac as well, by the way. iPhone, iPad, and Mac, all three platforms with one code base. This was a hackathon. My team and I did it in one day. In fact, they did more of the coding than me in the first day for this. So, in the first day, they built an iPhone app. In the second day, I modified it to work on iPad and Mac as well. So, that's the code we are looking at. And in this refactoring, we are not changing the features of the product or the UX or any of those. It's just an engineering work. I've opened it in VS Code, the online version of VS Code, by the way, in the browser. That's something very interesting. You can directly open a GitHub repo without kind of syncing it down to your PC. It's convenient. And I have settings synced using my GitHub account with the VS Code installed locally on my Windows machine. So anyway, let's look at this. First, let's collapse all of them. There's a README, and a README is important for any project. Let's check if this link exists. Okay, it does. Great. And what does this say? iOS port of Karthik's tax calculator. Yeah, I mean, even though this link works because of the GitHub redirect, let's update the link just to make sure it continues working in the future. I don't know how long GitHub redirects work when you rename a project. Okay, so this is one change. Let's look at the main code. Where do we start? Let's start with app delegate, which is where iOS execution begins. This is all standard, nothing to do here really. There are like two blank lines here. We can delete one. We don't need this blank space within the function. That's about it. Name of the project is mentioned. Whatever. Info.plist has nothing to see. It's an iOS internal thing. Let's look at the scene delegate. Okay. Again, too much blank space. Okay, there's some auto-generated comments, which are probably, I mean, in general, it's not good to leave these in. In this case, it helps because many people, including me, don't remember exactly what this will connect to function will do. Are these parentheses necessary? Card length. Let's create a dictionary which is iOS speak for a map. Cannot find oh, you need to use let. Oh, so does it work? No, it's coming here and returning. So this code does seem to work. If you want to be extra sure, you can put a print statement here as well. Returning. So you can see how you don't need parenthesis around this. So just remove extraneous stuff. Yeah, there are too many auto-generated functions which do nothing, and I don't know whether these are all necessary to have or optional. Because in iOS, in some cases, the documentation says you should override this function even if you're not going to do anything in the implementation. You just can't blindly remove the implementations because they're dummy. Oh, this is optional. Even though it's optional, it has an implication. When you implement this method, UIKit calls this method but does not call some other method. So let's see if that method is even there in the code. Application, what was it? I think it's application, did enter back. Never refactor clumsily. Okay, great. So basically, when an app goes to the background, iOS lets us know so that we stop what we are doing now that we're in the background, but we don't do anything anyway, like an ongoing process. So this is not needed. So as I refactor this code, don't take it as a criticism of the original authors. It was a hackathon project. So the idea was to do quick and dirty work. It's not a failing on them if the code is not good. I asked them to write bad code. Now we are just using this code as an exercise in refactoring. Okay, this is the same thing. Scene will resign active. Again, optional. Application will resign active. I don't think any of these are present. Yes. Did become active. Again optional. The fact that it is auto-generated is not an excuse to commit it as it is. Oh, we are not doing anything. We're just creating a local variable and returning. Let's look at the scene delegate. This is again optional. Yeah. Are we using this window property? See, this can't be removed because it has to return something and it's not optional. iOS has this weird naming convention, or Apple has this convention where often the function name is not descriptor. In this case, the function name is application, which is not even a verb, it's a noun. But you're supposed to read it as a sentence. Application did finish launching with options. So, when you invoke it at the call site, you invoke it this way: application, whatever A, did finish launching with options, whatever the options are here. This is how. So when you read it at the call site, you read it as application A did finish launching with options. This is the actual logical name. This is poor programming style that Apple follows. I don't. But anyway, we can't control that. Just pointing it out that this is not something to be emulated. So anyway, let's just look at this. This is not optional. This is a starting point for iOS. Oh, this is also optional. Oh, application will finish launching and application did finish launching, and did is considered to be the older one. Which one are we using? Oh, we are using the older one. So sometimes the thing is you have two functions and you are supposed to implement any one of them. So at the language level they are declared as optional because each of them individually are optional, but one of them is required sometimes. I don't know whether that's the case here. Let's check it out. This is also optional. Okay. Yeah, I guess we have investigated this and we should keep this. Like we should keep one of them. Because when in doubt, don't screw it up. Let's implement the newer one. Let's also understand the difference before we make a change. Yeah, so in iOS, generally they use the convention of will and did. Will says something is going to happen. Did says it has happened. So for example, if you're taking a photo, you'll get a call back saying will capture photo or something. Then after the capture is completed, you will get another call back saying did capture photo. At that point, you can move the camera. Yeah, okay, there is some thing about state restoration, which is basically an iOS API where if an app gets shut down in the background for lack of memory or any other such reason, or to save battery or something, and you reopen the app, the state of the app is saved and restored, so it looks like the app has been running. Whichever screen you are in, you will be in that same screen. Whichever tab you are in, you will be in that. Wherever the cursor is, if you're editing something, it will be there. It look as if the app has been running. So that's a state restoration thing. So since we don't care about state restoration here, we will just use this one. We'll finish launching options. Line length is something to keep in mind. This is like there are two schools of thought. One is to say don't bother, focus on the logic. The other is to say make it readable by aligning this way. But even that doesn't make it readable. Yeah, never mind. Let's not be anal about this. Let's leave it as it is. Okay, so we have implemented the API that Apple has suggested, will instead of did. Let's look at the diffs so far. Oops. Let's commit. How do I stage changes? Let's commit these two. Commit messages should say what you are doing and why. You don't do things for random reasons, right? Oh shit. I don't think we put equal to nil here. That. So ideally you should be doing this on a Mac and you should compile it, and if you have automated tests like unit tests, you should run it, you should test it manually. But typically you don't do this equal to nil here, or do you? Let's check out this documentation. UI application dedicated. Yeah, There's no equal to nil here. Now I am confused as well. It's been a while since I did Swift. Should you specify default protocol implementation? So I know that normally if there's no protocol involved, yeah, I think you have to do it this way. So normally if there's no protocol involved, you do specify these optional parameters. So going back to this code editor, if you have a function like this, func sort, take an array, ascending bool equal to true. Now this is, and you have some implementation. Now you can call it this way, sort array or sort array ascending false, for example. You can call it this way. So this is for a normal function, and this can be in a class as well, right? Class something, doesn't matter. But here it's a protocol implementation. See, so here we should check out specify default parameter value. No, somebody has some proposal about something. We don't want proposal. You can just test it in code actually. So we'll define our own protocol P, func do something ascending bool equal to true. Class C implements protocol P, func do something ascending bool equal to true. This seems odd. Why would you specify the default value twice? And if you specified it differently, which one, like if you specified false here, what would the default be, true or false? I don't know. We'll just print doing something. Let C equal to C, C dot do. 5, 3. Oh, you can't have a default value here. Default argument not permitted in a protocol method, whatever that is. Yeah, this guy also wants a default value for something. So now my question is, if default values are not allowed in a protocol, how can this have a default value? I don't understand. Somebody got hurt with this. Let's see what they're saying. Okay, whatever. This guy has two different functions and the wrong one is being invoked. That's not our situation. So maybe we'll just copy paste this actual code here into this thing. And see if it accepts it. So let's think about this, right? If there's no default parameter, you have to invoke it every time. And this amounts to defining two functions actually, one without a parameter, one with. It's becoming too complex. Let's try this. I don't know if UI kit and stuff is present here in this tutorial point. Did I misspell it? UI kit with a capital K. It's not present here. Let's look at this. And if it doesn't work, we won't try out yet another Swift. There's the code. Yeah, no UI kit. It's only on Apple platforms, and this is Linux. I think all these are running on Linux. Swift is running on Linux here. And you'll have a lot of problems with running Swift on Linux. Like officially it's supported, but a lot of APIs are missing because they're not part of the Swift language, they're part of the Apple OS. Anyway, just one second. Yeah, sorry for that. So let's Google on this. App delegate equal to. Yeah, never mind, we won't bother about this. Actually, if you look at the diff in GitHub, oh, we did add equal to nil. Okay, fine. I mean, if this were a real project, we would just compile it. If it gave an error, we would ignore it. So never mind. So let's move on from this. We need to commit this. Remove empty implementations of scene delegate functions. There's nothing Okay, great. Now let's go back to the code. We are done with app delegate, done with scene delegate, done with the readme. Let's look at the main controller. And then there are extensions. Let's look at extensions first. Double to currency, okay? Number formatter, locale, ENIN. This is too nested. For a string interpolation, you shouldn't have like two levels of nested functions within it. Let's look at the number formatter in iOS. What was that function called? Dot string, okay? So it does take an NS number. NS number is like a wrapper class. It wraps any type of a number, be it int, double, float, etc. It returns an optional string. You know, it should always return a valid string. It should never return nil. So that is why we are force unwrapping it. Excuse me. Don't make your don't overuse static typing in your APIs. Like in this case, like why should it return an optional string? Just return an empty string, no, if you can't do the formatting. Anyway. This returns currency down to paise, which people don't need. Ideally, it should be 0, maximum fraction digits. Right. Yeah. Anyway, we'll leave it as this for now. Let's look at UI view extensions. Dismissible scroll view. So basically, if you have a text field within a scroll view and you tap outside the text field, you you want it to dismiss. The comment is not well written. To dismiss, it should be like a scroll view which dismisses the keyboard when the user touches the rest of it. A scroll view which dismisses the keyboard when something happens. So it should be a noun, not to do this. Okay, basically when touches began, you end editing. And when you call this end editing, the keyboard disappears. And when you call begin editing, the keyboard appears. So that's fix to a problem where the scroll view did not work after dismissing the keyboard. Okay. Oh my god, so much nesting. Oof, this itself is nested. Keyboard will show. It must be Apple's API. Oh, this looks like an iOS callback, but it's not. It just registers a observer. Keyboard will show. Oh, there's another one. Keyboard will show. I don't understand this. Oh, this is on a. No, this is. Wait. So again, there's a problem here. Okay, let's fix this step by step. Let's. I'll explain to you what an extension is. In Swift, you can add something to an existing class. So if you have a class here, class bike with some function, say start engine. Now you can add, and suppose this class is defined by somebody else in another file, which you can't change. You want to add a function to it, you can do it this way. Flashlights, whatever. And now if I have a bike, I can call both the built-in methods of bike as well as the added methods of bike the same way. It's very natural and convenient. These are extensions in Swift. Now, when you have an extension, you should put it in a file of this format. The file on the class to which you're adding the extension, and then a plus symbol, and then a phrase that describes the purpose of the extension. So if it is related to saving, then it will be UI view plus saving. If it is related to layout, it would be UI view plus layout. Now within this, so there are two mistakes here. One is this file should be called UI view controller plus extensions. Again, this was hastily written code. It's not a criticism of the author. So there are two extensions stuffed into one file. There's one on UI view, there's one on UI view controller. And this is not an extension, so it shouldn't be here. It is in this extensions folder. So not a problem. Let's fix this. UI view controller plus keyboard should be this way. Excuse my cold. Import UI kit to make this work. Okay. We haven't refactored it, we've just moved it. So let's look at the diffs. Oh, this is just a new file. Okay, now we are done with this. Okay, let's now look at this. Okay, so all this is, so basically the overall form of this is notification center dot default dot add observer, 3 parameters and a block. Okay, good. This needs some documentation. What does it do? When should you call it? Should you call it only once or multiple times or whatever? So one thing you'll notice is there is no return in any of these nested things. If some conditions hold, oh no, there's unnecessary space here. This naming is also not right. The V should be capital. See here, scroll view space as a capital. So keep the name of the variable consistent with the class. Don't do it randomly. Did I catch all of them? Scroll view, capital, capital, capital. Again, normally the compiler would tell you, but you should actually use find replace. I'm doing it the dumb way. Okay, fine. So moving away from the case issue, I don't think you need to do it this way. You don't need brackets, parentheses. Let me open the local VS Code. This is future cam. Did I get my regex wrong? Excellent. Yeah, you don't need a parenthesis here. Let's go back to the browser-based code we are looking at. Again, these are things I'm taking time because it's been a couple of years since I did Swift, but if you're regularly doing it, it won't be so slow. Okay. Keyboard rect. Okay, if like this, you're doing some calculation, you're finding something, you're converting some coordinate systems. Basically, if all these checks pass, you're calling this function. And there's no return statement anywhere. So either case, you are uh, calling this. So now too much nesting makes it hard to understand. So let's break it down. Here. I hope tabs and spaces are not getting big. Yeah, so iOS has this thing called defer, which means once all this execution is done, even if you have intermediate returns or anything, though it doesn't apply in this case, this will get invoked. So now you can do this. So if let basically checks if it is not nil, and then only it goes in, and you create another variable which is not null. The type is not optional, so you don't need to unwrap. Just to illustrate it for those of you who don't know Swift, if I say, okay, let's go back to the class bike here. Go to MG road. Let's go to MG road, and let's say we are given a bike. Right? This function must be called with a bike. Alternatively, you can do it this way, where you're not. You can give it. I mean, you must give an argument, but the argument can be null or nil, as Swift calls it. What happens in this case? The function has to check that there is no bike, and if so, it has to maybe go by metro or go by Uber or go to MG road some other way if there's no bike that is given to it. So go to MG road. Yeah, so this is an optional thing. If you want to use this bike, you can't say bike.start engine because the bike may not exist, right? So what you do is you say if let bike equal to bike. Here you are creating a new local variable. It just happens to have the same name, but you can have a different name if you want, like this. Now use B to go to MG road. And then you return use Uber to go to MG road. You can do it this way. Or you can change it to guard let, which will return if it is. So basically guard is like a if it's the opposite of it, and it has to return. So here, let's not, I won't be spending more time on Swift here. You will do guard let this, else return. So guard has to have a return in the else case, and one of the parentheses goes away and all this gets dedented. This goes away. Oh my god, so many blank lines here. Okay, great. Do I have too many? No, matching. Except for the indentation, I think this has to be dedented. Okay, fine. Yeah, now it matches. So now we got rid of one level of nesting. We'll play the same trick here. Else return. This is too nested. Swift options make it kind of messy. That's okay. Again, this stuff has to get dedented. And one more bracket goes away. So again, here, this should be fixed by saving it to a local variable and checking if it is nil. And that way you don't have to have this force unwrap. In this case, it is fine. It doesn't crash at runtime because you've already checked if it is nil. If it is not, you checked whether it's nil, but it's not type safe. So the way you do it is guard let first responder equal to self dot else return. Again, dedent all of this stuff. Remove one. And here you just do first responder. Don't copy paste code fragments like this. In this case, I saw this highlighted code occurring thrice, which is bad. Okay. And putting the three guardlets makes it easier to understand. Don't have random space. First responder, this can probably go to the previous line. So scroll view space plus text field space. Let's try to dedupe this code because duplicated code is bad. One way of rewriting this if statement is this way. Right? Would you agree they are identical? So if I have if a greater than b, I can always change it to if a minus b greater than 0. So this is 5 and this is 2. This will be 3, which is greater than 0. Now these can be saved as a local variable. The same variable actually. And now you say if gap is greater than 0. This can go here on the lets. Oh, this should be. So when you break it into lines in iOS, they should be aligned. So this A of animated, which is the second argument of this function, should be aligned visually before the C, the first argument. There. So now, what have we done? We have done this differ, so we are not forgetting it. Now, even if we return, the differ will ensure that the block callback is called as it was in the original code. So don't change the meaning of code when you refactor. Keyboard. Okay. There are too many calls like dot size, dot height. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Actually, this I will just fix it right now. Do we have dot size, dot width? No, we have only height. Okay, fine, we'll get to that later. Never mind. Let's move on to this other function. There is cgrect.0 for this. Zero. Origin and size are both 0. So you also don't have to do this. It's a cgrect. You can just do dot 0. The Swift compiler infers it because it knows the type of this function. It is a cgrect. So when you say dot 0, it knows it's cgrect.0. There's also a cgpoint.0. Yeah, this is bad. We are copy pasting this code. It should be a local. Okay, we'll get to it. cgpoint dot 0. This need not be in another line now that it is much more concise. Zero. This is helpful. Readers of code should not wonder why it works the way it does. You don't need self here, it's unnecessary. Oops. Okay, so remove observer. Let's look at the type of that. Should be notification center. Yes. No, there's a 3-parameter version. ns notification dot name. Okay. View dot find first response. Why do you need to do this? You can directly call it on the view. Yes. Okay, never mind. Not too sure about what will happen if you remove this. Syntactically, you can remove this code and call view.resign first responder, but not sure, so I won't kind of mess with it for now. Do we need to remove keyboard observers? View will disappear. I think this is not really needed. Yeah, see, this is necessary only if you pop a view controller. So a view controller is like a full screen thing in an iOS app. So if you open a notes app, let's say you see a list of notes, you click one note and then you go into a separate view. That's a separate view controller. And when you pop that, this happens. But I think this app has only one view controller. So it will never disappear until the app itself dies. I can Google search it. No, this doesn't answer our question. So this is not needed. So we can remove this. Basically, deinitialization code should be written only if it's going to be deinitialized. Otherwise, it's just like unnecessary. Great. I think we made enough changes. Let's look at the diffs. We have removed deinitialization code, clean up UI view controller extension. What all did we do? We updated the comment, we changed the case, we removed these enormous levels of nesting. And we introduced yet another guardlet for the first responder. Instead of checking nil, we moved this gap variable outside and checked if gap is greater than 0. And we use defer for this. In the next function was much cleaner. One is we use these like dot zeros everywhere. I don't know why this has to be in the next line, UI view controller. Oh, it's not in the next line, that's just the diff view that is wrapping. And we have removed the deinitialization code. One more thing we can do is this find view controller. Where is it? Okay. This can just be a var. It is more natural to invoke. Just have to make sure the name doesn't. So I was going to call it just first responder, but want to make sure it doesn't conflict. Yeah, there isn't anything called just first responder. Apple search, I don't know how well it works. Search. NS is typically the Mac API, it's not iOS, which we are not using. This is first responder, accepts, okay, yeah. Is there no filter for this? Yeah, we can just call it first responder. Now, it just becomes more natural to access it as a variable rather than as a function. Okay, cool. Let's commit this. We can move on to other files. Is there anything else to improve? We can define a height variable. This is like too bad. Self.view.frame.size.height. I don't like. We can fix it later. add two spaces here and here. Okay. I still don't like how nested it is, but let's look at. Oops, it's not source control. In this file itself, before we look at the call sites, is there anything to improve? Yeah, I don't see anything obvious. View will appear. So basically this looks like it is called when the keyboard will show. So imagine you have a text box in an iOS app. You tap it, then the on-screen keyboard appears. That is when this will be called. At least it looks like that, but it's actually called on initialization. So this is not keyboard will show. The name is wrong. It is register for keyboard will show notification. Register for notification. This is a better name. It's just registering, and then later on, whenever the keyboard appears, iOS will post this notification, which will invoke the observer. So at this point, we are just registering it. And do we need two functions to register for both? No, right? We are registering for both at once. And they're called with the same functions. There you go. This argument is always nil. Wait, did I mess it up? Let's look at the ifs. It's calling keyboard will show in self. Wait. There is a keyboard.show here which takes one parameter, a notification, and this one calls it on options scroll view, which is a UI scroll. Where did that go? Oh, it's case sensitive. It'll be an IB outlet somewhere here. So this is a UI scroll view. So it seems we have two functions that take different arguments. This one will take a UI scroll view with an optional block. Yeah, I think this is like messily written. What did we change here? We changed only this call side, which will call keyboard will show with an option scroll view. This is a notification which is not even that, so it doesn't match. The private function won't match. This also won't match. This should be a safe refactoring because these two take a notification, the main controller functions. The UI view controller functions take a scroll view, and a scroll view and notification, they're not a subclass of one another, so they can't be cast anyway. So these are two different functions, and in the call set we are calling it with the scroll view, which means we are calling it with this extension functions, which means we can merge them. Yes, this is a correct refactoring. So register for keyboard notifications on the option scroll. Okay, fine. Now that it is a correct change, if you look here, the second argument, the block, yes, 955. Here, this block is never used. It's always going with the default value of nil, which means we don't even need to invoke it. Here. So, don't have callbacks that are not used. It just adds more complexity. Okay, now let's look at the diffs. Merge the two functions in the extension to one, rename it to avoid confusion. Merge the two functions in the view controller extension, remove unused callback, rename them to clarify intent and avoid a name clash. All right. Is there any more we can do with this class? Yeah, I mean, we could do something with the size dot height. Oh, I keep confusing that for the search box. Yeah, we can define a simple extension for it because it is used 4 times, thrice to read and once to write. Now maybe at this scale it doesn't make sense. We'll make the change anyway. We can revert it if we take a look. What's it called? CG rect plus height. Import core graphics. CG stands for core graphics, so that's the right import. You can also import UIKit, which indirectly imports core graphics, but the more precise the import, the better. Height, that's what we are doing. CG float, and we have a getter, and we have a setter. Return size dot height. So the CG rect consists of an origin and a size. Size dot height equal to new value. So the getter returns the size dot height. I think we have the same thing in FutureCam code base. Computer is little slow because of the screen recording. See, the extension height returns just size.height. Oops. Let's look at the diffs. Extension function. Extension, this is a property. Height on CG effect. And all the files should be sorted. VS Code does it well. In Xcode, you have to manually sort, which is an annoying thing. Anyway, coming back. So I think that unnecessary self.calls like this, you don't need this. You need it in a callback. Tons. A good amount of refactoring is just repetitive work. Don't be annoyed. It's in fact easier than harder work because there's less potential for things that go wrong, things to go wrong. Don't have a wrong attitude of I'm so smart, why am I doing this? Or anything like that. We all have to do such work. Because nobody else will come and do it for us. Alt Shift arrow. Let's just try it out. Never mind. Here again, it's not. Here, this is a callback or a block. So here you need it. It just becomes more readable. Oh, I really like editing in a diff view. Now, this amount of effort you're not going to put into refactoring in a real project every day. Refactoring is something that's ongoing, but it won't be like the only thing you do, right? Because this has never been looked at, I'm spending a lot of time. Similarly, if you have a project where code quality has not been taken seriously at all, then yeah, you need to spend significant time. It's a good investment. And also, typically in a real project, you wouldn't go and fix the entire project like this. You'd start by working on a task, and whatever comes in the way, whatever technical debt, you just fix that. Anyway, you don't need this declaration also because the type is UI view. I don't think I need to press Ctrl S here. remove unnecessary self dot qualifiers. This is a law of Demeter violation. You shouldn't have a dot b dot c dot d dot e. At least we made it one step better by removing frame dot size dot height. Yeah, basically you shouldn't do this indirectly. You're asking self for the view. You're asking the view for the frame. You're asking the frame for the height. It should be more encapsulated. I'm not saying in this case, I'm saying as a general guideline. Okay, move on. Oh, this still needs to be fixed, okay? This extensions directory should be used only for extensions, and also the file name class plus something dot swift should contain only extensions. Okay, we are done with that. Extensions folder we are done with. App delegate we are done with. The only remaining file is the main controller, which is typically the biggest. This should have references to some documentation about tax. And this is for Karnataka. Why is the provident fund rate 0? Assuming we are not subject to it. Employees, not consultants, are eligible for this. Actually, this should be documentation comments so that at the call site you'll see them better when you hover over it or something. I live in Karnataka, so I just put Karnataka here. And the people I built this for were also in Karnataka. So anyway, let's go. This is bad code. You shouldn't write device specific code like this. What you should do is, so basically let's take a step back. You have a UI that takes a certain height. On big iPhones, everything happens to fit. But if you're using a small phone, it doesn't fit. Now, if you put in a scroll view, if you enable the scroll view, what will happen is it will try to scroll, it will show a bounce animation, and it will interfere with touch gestures. They'll go to the scroll view now instead of to whatever you're trying to touch. So don't have unnecessary scroll view. So that's the first point. We'll just put a to do here. Instead calculate the height of the UI, compare it to the screen height to enable the scroll goes to 108. In any code, look at the existing conventions that are being followed. So here, lines are between, are they going up to 100? Yes, they're only going up to 100. So don't break the convention here. On the other hand, if you have a file where the line length is unlimited or a project, then it's okay for you also to do that. But when you're editing code, respect the convention. For now, I'm not going to bother doing this. I just put it to do. Assuming GST is not available, it's not applicable. If not, you can change the rate. Assuming your hailing of presumptive taxation under section 44 ADA. Have such references that people can Google and learn more. It shouldn't be a mystery. Why is it 0.5? Why is it not 0.7? Our UI breaks on iPhone in landscape. It's okay. View did load in the UI view controller. Let's look at this. View did load. Yeah, okay. Someone says good practice to call super when overheading. Never mind. I don't know why we are toggling these on startup. I prefer to hide the iOS status bar to make more room for the content, though on the newer phones with the notch it doesn't. So basically the initial values are being stored in these variables, these things here, and when the UI loads, the UI elements are being initialized to the same values here. So yeah, it is being used. Okay, never mind, we'll get there. Oops, 24%. I'll finish this video before it hits 0. So each of the field, when it is being set, we are updating the text. This should show percentage. Okay, never mind. We are not improving the UX here. Yeah, you want to remove commas when the user enters them. And if you enter some invalid values like cat, we'll change it to the empty string and not do the calculation. So basically there are two fields, whichever is updated, the other is calculated. If the take home pay is changed, the CTC is calculated based on the take home pay and updated. If the CTC is changed, the take home pay is calculated in the reverse direction. So whichever you update, the other one is changed. And when any of the other, these are like supporting parameters, right? These are the two parameters. So the basic format is like this. I'll just write it here. We can delete it later on. You have A to B. If A changes, B changes, and if B changes, A changes. And then C, D, E are like the parameters. These are only inputs. So, like the tax rate and, the GST rate and presumptive rate, all these things are like CDE. These are only inputs. Whereas A and B act as both input and output. If you change A, B changes. If you change B, A changes. So this code, there is a slight difference here, which is if the professional tax value changes to an invalid value like cat or hello, then we replace it with 0. Similarly, the SPF rate, and you have a segmented control. This is a segmented control in iOS. It looks like this. You can select one of these. So we have one with two parameters, employee and consultant, two options. This shouldn't happen. So it should be never fail silently. Unexpected segmented control selection. It's not toggle, it is update. Toggle means if you call it twice, it will come back to the original state. Whereas if you just say, if call this twice and if is employee is true, second time will not make any change. The color will still be dark text and the field will still be enabled. So these should be update, not toggle. Let's look at the diffs. Add comments. And by the way, these should not be var, they should be let. I hope we are not assigning them. That would be a worse problem. Yeah. Let now one problem here is that the main controller is also doing the calculation. I think in this program, given the amount of code, it's fine, but in a bigger program, it would be a problem. So all these things are a problem when they are a problem. And these, if you have multiple instances of main controller, which you don't, but just saying, then you have multiple instances of these, but they're all constant, doesn't make sense. So these should be made global. File private. The earlier thing was also scoped to the entire project. I hope this is not being used. Yeah, only in this file. Okay, never mind. Notice that everything says explicitly double because some of these values are integer. This is integer, this is integer. If you don't, and this is integer. If you don't specify that, it won't work. And then Swift gives you this annoying error saying you can't add an integer and it can, but Swift doesn't like it. Double space. This makes it a little hard to read. How many zeros are there? So it is 250,000 rupees. 0.5 lakhs. I think you can put commas. Swift number literal comma. Oh, you can put underscores. So that is the syntax. You don't need to do this. Great. Bunch of changes. Use let, reduce scope, rename toggle to update since they actually don't toggle anything. Don't fail silently. Like in a real production app, you probably actually if you do fatal error, Apple's tooling will catch you, will catch it and let you know the developer. So you don't need your own logging for this case. Anything crashes, Apple catches. Whereas if you have a case where something unexpected happened and you still continue running. So let's say you have an e-commerce store and someone is applying a discount and the coupon that they have entered allows them to have a discount of 150%, which means not only is the product free, you are paying them to place an order. So obviously something is wrong. Someone is generating invalid coupon codes within your company. So that needs to be logged. You would probably handle it in some way. You would maybe give an error saying this coupon is invalid and not apply any discount in this case, and you would keep running, you wouldn't crash. In that case, you need your own logging. But if it is just fatal error, yeah, you can just crash. Not okay, I think enough changes for one commit. What else can we improve? This requires longer explanation. So typically, if you're a consultant providing a service for, let's say, 100 rupees to a client, who is going to bear the GST? Typically, it is the client. But if you are bearing it on your end, then the GST rate should be calculated this way. So if the client is bearing it as is typical, change this to this way. So people can change it as needed. What else can we improve? Why are there so many blank spaces? This again, we can define an extension. Don't like repeated code. Excuse me. Let's reopen our favorite extensions folder again. UI text field. Port UI kit. Again, UI text field, right? So it is UI kit. For value as double. Number, I'll just call it. And what is the change we are making? This entire thing is a double. This was sender itself here. Text is optional, but it's never null, it's empty. Again, unnecessary static typing. Replacing occurrences of comma with this, with empty thing, and then you convert it to double. Then you return it. The number entered in the text field, or null if it's not a number. It should be plus number, not plus double. This chunk becomes sender dot. See how much cleaner it. What? We are updating this constant. Oh my god. So these are not constants. So they should be made, all of these are being updated. I looked at the casing and thought they're constants. These are now members of the class. At least let's keep it file private. I mean, people outside this file should not be modifying it. PF rate. This is iOS connection. Basic rate. So basically all these things which are constants are more like default values. If your employee tax deduction is different from this because of some special situation for you, you can update this. That's why they're not constants. They're more like defaults, which is good, just that the name should not be misleading. Shouldn't look like a constant. Let's make sure that PF rate equal to its assigned. It should be. Is this assigned? Yes, this should be professional tax. Is it assigned? Yes, it should be a var. I think one or two are not assignable. Presumptive rate, yes, it's assigned. Employee tax deduction, yes. GST rate, it is also assignable. We'll get to the slabs in a second. This should be a let. The slabs, let's look at them. These should be constants. The UI doesn't let the user change the income tax slabs. Maybe it should. Maybe in the future, if the tax code is changed and we don't update the app. Yeah, but that's a different level of extensibility which we don't have. These things are now constants. Have a comment like what slabs? These are for income tax, not professional tax, not GST. And this has a blank line to indicate that this comment applies to all three. Okay. Let's look at this. Oh, naming convention. We don't do this in Swift. See, naming convention is like this without underscores. Yeah, these were originally part of the class. They were moved out to global. Now they're put back because obviously we don't want global variables, even if they're file private. Hope there are no typos. Fix mistake in previous commit and introduce an extension for convenience. Text. All right, then I think my battery says that we are done with this refactoring and this video, and we spent a lot of time on it. So this is a public project. Oops. You can go to GitHub, go to this link. It's a public project, and you can see all the commits we made today. I think we have done a thorough job of refactoring this. There might be some more things, but I think it will be repetitive and not helpful, so I'll just leave it at that. If you'd like me to help your team in improving your code, my consulting link is in the description. Thank you.